What if the place you trust most, the place you send your children to learn, to grow, to be safe, was the very gateway to a nightmare you couldn't possibly imagine? What you are about to hear is a story that peels back the veneer of normalcy to reveal a darkness so profound, it threatens to swallow the light. It is a story of unspeakable evil, meticulously organized and hidden in plain sight. But it is also a story of extraordinary courage, of one woman who saw something and refused to look away, even when it meant risking everything. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. Before we descend into this harrowing account, please take a moment to click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You are not just joining a channel. You are joining a community that believes in bringing these crucial stories to light. Your support helps us continue our work. Now take a deep breath. The story of Eleanor Vance and the 72 children is about to begin. Eleanor Vance, or Ellie as she insisted her fourth graders call her, believed in the transformative power of a classroom. To her, Room 204 of Northwood Elementary was not just four walls of cinder block painted a depressingly neutral beige. It was a sanctuary, a laboratory of ideas, a place where nascent dreams could be nurtured into tangible futures. She was in her third year of teaching, and while the initial bright-eyed idealism had been tempered by the harsh realities of an underfunded public school system, her core passion remained undiminished. She loved these kids. She loved the chaotic symphony of their energy, the scrawled imperfections of their handwriting, the sudden, brilliant flashes of insight that would occasionally light up their young faces. Northwood Elementary served a sprawling, economically diverse community, which was a polite way of saying it was a melting pot of struggling families and a handful who were doing slightly better. It was a place of hand-me-down textbooks, bake sales for basic supplies, and teachers who frequently paid for pencils and paper out of their own pockets. But there was a fierce, protective pride in the school, a sense of shared struggle that bound them together. At the helm of this ship was Principal Marcus Abernathy, a man whose presence was as solid and unchanging as the oak tree in the schoolyard. He had been the principal for 2 decades, a figure of comforting authority with a placid smile, a neatly trimmed gray beard, and a reputation for knowing every single student by name. He was, by all accounts, the soul of Northwood. It was a Tuesday in early October when the first discordant note was struck in Ellie's symphony. It wasn't loud or jarring, but a subtle, unsettling silence where there should have been noise. The silence was in the shape of a small boy named Leo Martinez. Leo was a wisp of a child, with enormous brown eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world and a talent for drawing that was nothing short of prodigious. His notebooks were filled not with class notes, but with fantastical creatures, detailed starships, and portraits of his classmates that captured their essence with an almost unnerving accuracy. He was quiet, rarely speaking unless spoken to, but his art was loud, vibrant, and full of life. Leo had been absent on Monday, which wasn't unusual. Kids got colds. But when his seat remained empty on Tuesday, a small knot of unease tightened in Ellie's stomach. She checked the attendance system. His mother had not called him in sick. After the final bell, she walked down the echoing hallway to the main office. "Mr. Abernathy," she began, finding him sorting through a stack of mail. "I'm a little concerned about Leo Martinez. He's been out for 2 days, no call from home. That's not like his mother." Mr. Abernathy looked up, his smile warm and reassuring. "Ah, Eleanor, no need to worry. I just got off the phone with Mrs. Martinez not an hour ago. The family had a sudden opportunity, a job for her father down in Florida. They had to pack up and leave in a hurry over the weekend. She sends her apologies for not being able to say a proper goodbye." Ellie felt a strange pang of disappointment, mixed with something she couldn't quite name. Florida? Wow, that's abrupt. "Life can be like that," the principal said with a philosophical shrug. "I'll have his records transferred tomorrow. It's a shame to lose a bright one like him, but we wish them the best." He stamped a piece of mail with finality, and the conversation was clearly over. Ellie walked back to her classroom, the explanation replaying in her mind. It was plausible. Families in this district often moved for work, chasing stability wherever they could find it. But Leo, he hadn't said a word. Not a hint. He had been excited about the upcoming school art fair, meticulously working on a large charcoal drawing of a mythical phoenix. Would he really leave that behind without a word? She remembered their last conversation on Friday. He had seemed more tired than usual, a little pale. He'd complained of a stomach ache and had a small, circular bandage on his lower back, which he'd shyly explained away as a spider bite. She shook her head, chiding herself for being overly sentimental. She was growing too attached. That was a rookie mistake. Still, as she packed her bag, her eyes fell on Leo's empty desk, a lone crayon sitting forlornly in the pencil groove. An inexplicable sadness washed over her. The silence he left behind felt heavy, unnatural. The weeks turned into a month, and the rhythm of the school year took over. The incident with Leo faded, becoming just another small, sad memory. But then, a girl from the 5th grade, a bright student named Maya, also vanished. The story was eerily similar. A sudden job opportunity for her family, a hasty move to another state, a message relayed through Mr. Abernathy. Ellie overheard 2 teachers discussing it in the lounge. "Another one bites the dust," one said with a sigh, stirring her coffee. "That's the 3rd one this semester." "It's the economy," the other replied. "People have to go where the work is." The 3rd one, Ellie's ears perked up. She hadn't heard about another. She began to pay closer attention, not just to her own class, but to the entire school. She started noticing things she had previously dismissed. The number of students who were frequently absent due to vague, recurring illnesses. A certain listlessness in some of them, a fatigue that seemed too deep for their young age. Small, unexplained bruises or bandages they would dismiss with childishly simple explanations. And the pattern was always the same. They were often from the most vulnerable families, single parents working multiple jobs, recent immigrants, families struggling below the poverty line. These were the children who were least likely to be questioned, whose parents were too overwhelmed to challenge the school's authority. A cold, creeping dread began to take root in Ellie's mind. It was a monstrous, unthinkable thought, a seed of paranoia she tried to squash. This was Northwood. This was Mr. Abernathy's school. It was a safe place. She was just stressed, overworked, letting her imagination run wild. Determined to prove her fears wrong, she decided to do some digging. She needed data, something concrete to dispel the shadows in her mind. One afternoon, under the guise of organizing cumulative files for parent-teacher conferences, she gained access to the school's record room. The room was a dusty archive of past students, a paper graveyard of academic lives. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and decaying glue. She started with Leo Martinez. She found his file, thick with his artwork and her own glowing reports. Stapled to the front was the official withdrawal form. It was signed by Mr. Abernathy with a note, "Family relocated. Records requested by mail." There was no forwarding address. She looked at the signature. It seemed perfect, almost too perfect. She pulled the file for Maya, the 5th grader. The same form, the same note, the same pristine signature. Then she started searching for other students who had withdrawn under similar circumstances over the last few years. The task was laborious. She spent hours in that dusty room, her initial mission to disprove her fears slowly morphing into a desperate search for confirmation. The pile of files on her table grew. 12 students from the previous year, 15 from the year before that. All sudden moves, all relayed through the principal, all with the same vague explanation. The turnover rate was staggering, far beyond the normal churn of a school in a transient neighborhood. As she delved deeper, she found the notation. It was on the inside cover of each file, a small, almost invisible mark in the corner, written in a pale gray ink. It was an alphanumeric code, a string of letters and numbers that seemed to have no logical sequence. LM3881Z, MP4012X. Each code was unique to the child. It was clinical, detached, and utterly terrifying. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. This was real. Something was terribly, horribly wrong at Northwood Elementary. This was no longer a vague suspicion. It was a pattern, a system. These children weren't just moving away. They were being taken. Her next move was reckless, born of a rising panic. She knew Mr. Abernathy kept the more recent digital records on his office computer. She had to see them. She waited until well after dark, until the janitors had finished their rounds and the school was submerged in an oppressive silence. The only sounds were the hum of the fluorescent lights and the frantic thumping of her own blood in her ears. His office door was locked, but she had seen where he kept a spare key, tucked on a small ledge above the doorframe, a laughably simple hiding place that spoke of his absolute confidence in his own security. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the door and slipped inside. The room was tidy, organized, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old books. It was the office of a dedicated educator, a wolf in sheep's clothing. She booted up his computer. It was password protected, of course. She tried the obvious ones: Northwood, Principal, Abernathy. Nothing. Then she remembered something he'd said at an assembly, a sentimental story about his first dog. Skipper, he'd called him. She typed it in. Skipper. The desktop bloomed to life. She felt a wave of nausea. She was in. She navigated through the file system, looking for student records. She found a folder labeled Transfers. It was a decoy, filled with the same official-looking forms she'd found in the record room. This wasn't it. She kept looking, her eyes scanning every file name. Then she saw it. A folder named Logistics. It sounded so benign, so bureaucratic. She clicked it open. The contents made the air leave her lungs in a silent scream. It wasn't a list of names. It was a ledger. There were photos of the children she recognized: Leo, Maya, and dozens of others. Next to their pictures were horrifyingly detailed medical profiles. Blood type, tissue compatibility, lung capacity, heart rate, notes on their general health. There were dates, and next to the dates, there were staggering dollar amounts, ranging from $50,000 to over $200,000. Each entry was marked with one of two words: pending or fulfilled. Leo's entry was marked fulfilled. She scrolled down, her hand shaking so badly she could barely control the mouse. The list went on and on. There were profiles of children still enrolled at the school, children she saw every day in the hallways, on the playground. Their entries were all marked pending. She counted them: 72. 72 innocent faces, cataloged and priced like livestock. This wasn't just a trafficking ring. The medical data, the prices. It was an organ harvesting operation. They were selling pieces of these children. The spider bite on Leo's back, the recurring illnesses, the fatiguite was all part of the process. A horrifying system of priming and preparing them for a grim, unimaginable fate. Suddenly, a sound from the hallway, the distant clang of the main school doors opening and closing. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching the office. Panic seized her. It was him, Abernathy. He was coming back. Her mind raced. She couldn't run. He would see her. She looked around frantically, her eyes landing on a small, black flash drive plugged into the monitor's USB hub, used for displaying photos on a digital frame. With trembling fingers, she ripped it out, plugged it into the tower, and began dragging the logistics folder onto it. The progress bar seemed to mock her, crawling at an agonizingly slow pace. The footsteps were getting closer, slower now, as if the person was checking doors. Copying. 75%. 85%. 95%. The file transfer completed. She yanked the drive out just as the doorknob began to turn. There was nowhere to go. She scrambled, not thinking, and dove into the narrow space between a large filing cabinet and the wall, pulling a hanging coat over the gap to conceal herself. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to make herself smaller, to stop the frantic heaving of her chest. The office door swung open. The lights flickered on. She could see the polished tips of Mr. Abernathy's shoes through a small gap. She held her breath, praying for invisibility. He walked to his desk, humming a cheerful, off-key tune. He sat down, the leather of his chair groaning in protest. She heard the click of the mouse. A moment of silence. Then another. The humming stopped. Odd, he murmured to himself. Ellie's blood ran cold. Had she left a file open? Changed the desktop? What had she done? She heard him typing. More clicking. A long, drawn-out silence followed. A silence so profound and heavy that she felt it was crushing her. She risked a peek. He was staring at the screen, his face no longer placid or benevolent. It was a mask of cold, calculating fury. His eyes darted around the room, scanning every corner. They swept past her hiding spot, and for a terrifying second, she was sure he had seen her. But he hadn't. He stood up, walked to the door, and looked down the empty, silent hallway. He turned back, his gaze once again circling the room, a predator sensing a disturbance in its territory. He hadn't found her, but he knew. He knew someone had been there. He knew his secret was compromised. He walked back to his desk, picked up his phone, and dialed a number. His voice, when he spoke, was stripped of all its warmth, all its grandfatherly charm. It was flat, hard, and chillingly calm. "We have a problem," he said. "A significant breach. It happened here, at the school. I want a full sweep, and find out who had access tonight. Find them." He hung up. Ellie remained frozen in her hiding spot, clutching the small flash drive in her sweaty palm. Felt as heavy as a tombstone. The sanctuary of Northwood Elementary had shattered, revealing the charnel house it truly was. She was no longer just a teacher. She was a witness, and in the cold, methodical voice of the man she had once trusted, she had heard her own death sentence being signed. Her only hope, the only hope for the 72 children on that list, was now compressed into the tiny piece of plastic and metal she held in her hand. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that getting out of the school would be the first and perhaps the easiest step in the terrifying journey that lay ahead. The escape from Northwood was a blur of primal fear. Ellie waited, every muscle screaming with tension, for what felt like an eternity after Abernathy left his office, locking the door behind him with a definitive click. She counted to 500, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, before daring to move. Peering out, she saw the hallway was empty, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the emergency lights. She didn't go back the way she came. Instead, she slipped into the adjacent staff room, fumbled with the latch on an old, rarely used window, and squeezed her way out, dropping silently onto the damp grass of the school's back lawn. She didn't look back. She ran. She ran through the darkened suburban streets, the familiar neighborhood now a landscape of looming shadows and imagined threats. Every car that passed, every dog that barked, sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through her system. She didn't go home. Her small, cozy apartment, once her refuge, was now the first place they would look. Abernathy knew where she lived. They knew her car, her habits, her life. She was a known quantity, and that made her vulnerable. She ended up at an all-night diner on the far side of town, a place of cracked vinyl booths and the smell of stale coffee. She huddled in a corner, the flash drive clutched in her hand, her mind racing. The police. She had to go to the police. It was the logical, rational thing to do. She had evidence, undeniable proof of a monstrous crime. But a chilling thought stopped her. An operation of this scale, running for years, undetected, right under everyone's noses, couldn't be just Abernathy. It had to be a network with money, with influence. How deep did the rot go? Could the local police be compromised? A risk she couldn't afford to take. One wrong move, one misplaced ounce of trust, and the evidence would disappear, and so would she. And the 72 children on that list would have their fates sealed. Her mind frantically sifted through her contacts, searching for a lifeline. Friends, familino, she couldn't endanger them. Then, a name from her past surfaced, a memory from her college journalism classes. Ben Carter. He hadn't been a close friend, more of a respected rival. He was fiercely intelligent, cynical, and possessed a relentless, almost obsessive drive for the truth. While Ellie had gone into teaching to build a better world, Ben had gone into investigative journalism to expose the parts of it that were broken. He was now a reporter for a major national newspaper, known for tackling tough, dangerous stories. He was her only shot. Finding his contact information was the first hurdle. She used the diner's spotty Wi-Fi on her phone, her fingers fumbling on the small screen. She found his professional page, which listed a generic email address for tips. It wasn't good enough. She needed to talk to him directly. She dove deeper into social media, alumni networks, piecing together fragments of his digital life. Finally, on an old university forum, she found a personal email address he had used years ago. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. She composed the email, her words a frantic, disjointed torrent of fear and desperation. Subject: Urgent, Northwood Elementary. We met in J-School Ben. My name is Eleanor Vance. We had Polner's investigative class together. I know this is out of the blue, but I'm in serious trouble. I'm a teacher at a school in Northwood, and I've uncovered something evil. It's an organ trafficking ring run out of the school. They have a list of 72 kids. I have proof. A ledger with names, medical data, prices. I can't go to the local police. I don't know who to trust. They know I have it. I think they are hunting me. Please, I know you cover these kinds of stories. You're the only person I could think of. Please help me. She attached a single, heavily redacted screenshot from the ledger child's photo blurred. The name blacked out, but the medical data and the horrifying dollar amount clearly visible. She hit send, her entire future, and the futures of 72 children, launched into the void of the internet. For the next 24 hours, Ellie lived like a ghost. She bought a cheap burner phone and a prepaid debit card with the little cash she had in her wallet. She took buses aimlessly, switching routes, never staying in one place for more than an hour. She bought a hoodie and sunglasses from a thrift store, a pathetic disguise that nonetheless made her feel slightly less exposed. She ate protein bars and drank lukewarm water from a bottle, the constant churn of fear having obliterated her appetite. She was a fugitive, hiding from a faceless enemy whose resources she couldn't begin to comprehend. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the children from the ledger. She saw Leo's shy smile, Maya's bright, inquisitive eyes. They weren't just names on a list. They were her students, her responsibility. The weight of that responsibility was a physical pressure on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The reply came 36 hours after she had sent the email. It was a single line from an encrypted email address. Burner phone number. Now, Ellie's hands shook as she typed in the number of her cheap phone. A minute later, it rang. "This is Carter." The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, devoid of warmth. "You have 2 minutes. Convince me you're not a crackpot." Ellie poured out the story, her voice raspy with exhaustion and fear. She told him about Leo, about Mr. Abernathy, about the record room, the codes, the computer file. She described the ledger in detail, the medical information, the pending and fulfilled statuses. She spoke with the raw, unvarnished terror of a true witness. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She could hear the faint sound of typing. "Eleanor Vance," he said finally. "Graduated summa cum laude. Golden Apple Teaching Award last year. Not the profile of a conspiracy theorist. Where are you?" "I can't say." "Smart," he conceded. "Don't go home. Don't contact your family. Don't use your credit cards. You've done well so far. But they're looking for you. A missing persons report was filed this morning by your principal, Marcus Abernathy, citing concerns for your erratic behavior and mental stability. He's already building a narrative to discredit you." The calculated cruelty of it sent a chill down her spine. He wasn't just going to make her disappear. He was going to erase her credibility first. "I need to see the drive," Ben said. "All of it. We meet in person." He named a location, a crowded transportation hub in a city 3 hours away. He gave her precise instructions. What entrance to use, what bench to sit on, what to wear. He would find her. The bus ride was agonizing. Every passenger seemed to be watching her. She clutched her bag, the flash drive a radioactive weight within it. When she arrived at the station, she followed his instructions to the letter. The place was a chaotic swirl of humanity, A perfect place to get lost. She sat on the designated bench, her back to the wall, and waited. 5 minutes later, a man sat down at the other end of the bench, seemingly engrossed in a newspaper. He was younger than she remembered, his face leaner, etched with a tension that hadn't been there in college. "Don't look at me," he said, his voice low, not moving his eyes from the paper. "They could have a spotter here. We're going to walk. I'll get up in 30 seconds. You'll follow a minute later. Keep a distance of 20 feet. I'll lead you somewhere safe." The ensuing walk was the most terrifying of her life. She followed him through the crowded city streets, her senses on high alert. Was that man in the trench coat following them? Did that car just circle the block? Ben led her on a circuitous route through a shopping mall onto a subway train for 2 stops, then off again and finally into a nondescript office building. He led her up a flight of stairs to a small, Spartan apartment. The door had 3 deadbolts. "This is a safe house," he explained, locking the door behind them. "Not in my name. Paid for in cash. We're clean here, for now." For the first time in 2 days, Ellie felt a sliver of safety. She sank onto a worn-out couch, the adrenaline that had been fueling her finally draining away, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion in its place. Ben wasted no time. "The drive." She handed it to him. He pulled out a laptop that looked like it had survived a war zone and plugged it in. As the contents of the logistics folder loaded onto the screen, the entire atmosphere in the room changed. Ben's professional detachment evaporated, replaced by a look of stunned horror. He scrolled through the files, his face pale. The photographs, the medical data, the price it was a catalog of human lives, meticulously curated for slaughter. 72, he breathed, his voice a horrified whisper. "My God." He looked at her then, his eyes filled with a new respect. "You were right to run. This is bigger than anything I've ever seen. This isn't just a local operation. The money, the logistics involved. This is international. Abernathy is just a manager, a recruiter." Over the next few days, the small apartment became their command center. They worked with a feverish intensity, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of righteous fury. Ben was a force of nature. He used his resources to start peeling back the layers of the conspiracy. He traced the digital signatures on the files, discovering they were routed through encrypted servers in Eastern Europe. He analyzed the financial data, uncovering a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore bank accounts designed to launder the money. Ellie's role was just as crucial. She provided the context, the human element. She went through the list of 72 children, one by one, providing Ben with everything she knew about them, their family situations, their personalities, their daily routines. Her memories, once the source of her joy as a teacher, were now critical pieces of intelligence. She remembered which child had a rare blood type, which one had complained of dizzy spells, which one's parents worked nights and wouldn't notice if their child was picked up by a different school van. They discovered the horrifying truth behind the vague illnesses and fatigue. The children were being systematically drugged with mild sedatives and immunosuppressants, a monstrous pre-op protocol to prepare their bodies for organ removal, making them more compliant and their organs more viable for transplant. The school nurse, a woman who had retired abruptly the previous year, was implicated. They were all part of it. The danger was no longer abstract. It was closing in. One evening, Ben was trying to hack into the server of a shell corporation they believed was the financial heart of the operation. Suddenly, his laptop screen went black. A single line of text appeared in stark white letters. "We see you." A powerful feedback loop erupted from the laptop speakers, a deafening electronic screech, before the machine sparked and died, a wisp of smoke curling from the keyboard. They were compromised. The enemy was not just powerful. They were sophisticated and they were watching. They had to move. Ben packed a go bag with a new, encrypted laptop and a handful of cash. "They'll have traced the IP address. They know we're in this city. We have a few hours, maybe less." As they prepared to leave, Ellie's burner phone rang. It was an unknown number. Her blood ran cold. Ben motioned for her not to answer, but something compelled her to. She hit the speakerphone button. The voice that came through was distorted, a digital growl, but the cadence, the smug, underlying tone of authority, was unmistakable. It was Abernathy. Eleanor, the voice rasped. You've been a foolish, foolish girl. Did you really think you could hide? Did you think a little bit of data could bring down a humanitarian enterprise of this magnitude? Humanitarian. Ellie spat, her voice trembling with rage. You're butchering children. We are saving lives, Eleanor. The voice continued, sickeningly calm. Wealthy, important lives. For every one of your little street urchins, a CEO, a world leader, a great artist gets a new lease on life. It's a simple, elegant equation. You have interfered with that. You and your journalist friend. A word of advice. Drop the drive. Disappear. If you do, we might let you live. If you don't, well, we know you have a sister in San Diego, don't you? It would be a shame if her children were to suddenly develop a mysterious illness. The line went dead. Ellie stared at the phone, pure terror washing over her. They had threatened her family, her nieces. The fight had just become infinitely more personal. She looked at Ben, her eyes wide with fear. He looked back, his own face grim, but his jaw was set with a hard, unyielding resolve. He's trying to scare you off, Ellie, Ben said, his voice low and steady. It means we're close. It means they're scared of us. We have the names, we have the financials, we have the whole damn blueprint. They can't let that get out. He pulled out a map. This shell corporation, the one they backhacked me through, it's a medical logistics company. It owns a fleet of private transport vans and a number of private medical facilities. According to the ledger, a big shipment is due in the next 48 hours. That's when they'll move the children. If we can figure out which facility they're using, we can stop them. The threat against her family had been meant to paralyze her, but it had the opposite effect. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but it was now overlaid with a white-hot, protective rage. They would not touch her family. They would not take another child. Let's find them, she said, her voice no longer trembling, but resonating with a newfound strength. Let's find that facility and burn their whole world to the ground. The threat against her family had galvanized Ellie, transforming her terror into a weapon. She and Ben operated on the knife edge of paranoia and purpose. They knew the traffickers were not just hunting them, but were also aware of being hunted. It was a race pure and simple. A race to find the children before the children were moved and disappeared forever into the voracious, global maw of the black market. The key was the medical transport company Ben had identified, a corporation named Vitae Logistics. On the surface, it was a legitimate enterprise, contracting with private hospitals for non-emergency patient transport. But Ben's digging revealed it was a hollow shell, its ownership a tangled web of offshore accounts and phantom directors, all leading back to the same financial network as the school. It was their delivery service. Working on their new, heavily encrypted laptop in a series of anonymous motel rooms, they cross-referenced the company's assets with the data from Ellie's flash drive. The ledger contained coded delivery schedules and location markers that had initially seemed meaningless. But Ellie, with her intimate knowledge of the school's rhythm and Abernathy's coded language from newsletters and announcements, began to see a pattern. A reference to a mountain retreat for gifted students in one of Abernathy's old emails corresponded with a location code in the ledger. That code, when cross-referenced with Vitae Logistics property holdings, pointed to one place: a decommissioned private hospital called the St. Jude's Medical Center, nestled deep in a remote, wooded valley 100 miles from the city. It was perfect, isolated, privately owned, and easily defensible. A digital search revealed that the facility had been purchased by Vitae Logistics 2 years prior, supposedly for conversion into a luxury wellness spa, a project that had since stalled. It was a lie. It wasn't a place of healing. It was a factory. This is it, Ben said, his finger tracing the satellite image of the sprawling, desolate complex. They're holding them here. The ledger says the next shipment cycle begins in less than 36 hours. That's our window. They had the what and the where. The question was what to do with it. Going to the authorities was still a massive risk. The network was powerful. One wrong call could tip them off and the children would be gone. Ben, however, had one last card to play. A trusted source within the FBI, a man named Agent Miller, with whom Ben had worked on a previous case involving international money laundering. Miller was old school,